Of course, I am in the 80s. I have my own career. Yeah, so it was very hard to work with the wedges and stuff, but we know.
I'd like to introduce some friends of mine to you. Would you welcome Mr. Robert Plant, Mr. Jimmy Page, Mr. John
This is Robert Townsend. I'm backstage, and like I said, we're going to talk to Robert Plant in a minute, but everybody's here. Bob Geldof is standing right here. How are you, sir?
I mean, there are a lot of managers, unfortunately, who were on what is known as record company managers, but you get your commission. As far as I'm concerned, no way, you know. It's the group and the manager, be the rest.
What percentage were you on with Led Zeppelin?
20%.
That's fairly standard percentage. So you were a fifth member.
20%, and I paid all my own expenses. I paid my tour manager, paid all my expenses. We all paid our own individual expenses.
One sentence that sums up how to be a good manager. This is the killer sort of typical TV question.
Have great belief in your artist. Believe. Don't do it because you think, you know what, it's 20% of that. Believe in within their selves and as musicians, and to be able to produce music. Belief. Belief.
Well, tonight, it's like, it's one of them nights where you see people that you haven't seen for quite a while, American friends, of course. Tonight, I'd like to bring to the stage one of the great guitarists now living in Los Angeles, an American friend. Would you welcome Mr. Brian Setzer? And would you also welcome Mr. Robbie Blunt? Mr. Robbie Blunt and Brian Setzer.
I hear the record. This is the Crackerjack Band.
Sure. The band, well, I had to get a permit to actually be seen with them because they're so young. They're young guys. Phil Johnson, the keyboard player, is very old. He's nearly 30. And he comes from that kind of British, eccentric, post-punk, angry young man department. Ambitious guy, quite a sense of humour and irony about himself. He gave me back the baby, baby, push, push part of Robert Plant that had gone away. He told me that most songs that were being played today were really Kashmir, fast or slow. And judging by what I'm hearing on American radio, at least 2 bands are doing Kashmir fast or slow all the time. He also opened the door to me finding probably the best young musicians in Britain, personally speaking. Chris Blackwell, the drummer, is another young guy who's a multi-instrumental player. He plays keyboard, sings, plays guitar. He sings better than I do. He operates 2 or 3 computers from pads around his kind of drum cage. And he introduced Doug Boyle, the guitarist, who was kind of into the Alan Holdsworth, post-John McLaughlin jazz fusion stuff, which to me is a kind of very affected area of music. It's either great or it just doesn't happen at all. There's no middle ground. And he could probably have a life forever in a 1-bedroom apartment if he lowered his guitar strap 2 notches. So he did. And he's learning very, very quickly that being a virgin isn't that much fun. He's really rocking there. And Phil Scragg, who played on the album, the bass player, couldn't work with us live, so we got this guy called Charlie Jones from a band in England called Violent Blue. So they're a great bunch, and the whole kind of team is geared to this excitement factor. After all the years of denial, college radio to me kind of represents something that is still, the motives are still the right ones. But it's hard really, because I know that a lot of the guys who are actually involved in AOR radio, in the big stations, I remember them 20 years ago, and they really were the right guys, and they really still are, but they're caught in a kind of, some kind of elusive trap, which really they've settled down into, you know? I mean, once you leave college, once you get on, you get a car, you fall in love, maybe that one night in the back seat at the drive-in, and you've got to do something about it, like get a job.
And pay a mortgage.
And pay a mortgage. And you're off. You're in there. You're locked in. What are you going to do? It's easy for me to stand here philosophizing at 39 years old and say, yeah, but that's no good. But you still got to look after yourself. And you got to look after your own.
What makes Jimmy Page and his guitar sound so unique?
What makes Jimmy Page? I've got no idea.
I mean, so many people try to copy him. No one ever gets that feel.
It's a subtle blend, though, my friend. Maybe it's just the angle that he leans back at. There's something remarkable about what he does. He does charge circumstances with a great deal of electricity, but he plays wonderfully.
20 years ago, I think you were quoted as saying that if you actually didn't make it as a star by age 20, you were going to just call it quits and become an accountant or whatever else.
No, I would have sold cars.
Okay, something would have come along in the more different realm of life.
I'd have had to hustle somehow or another. All I ought to do is just make real good records, and that's what, I mean, I just think I've made the best one since Physical Graffiti. And that was the last good record I made, Physical Graffiti, really. So everything in between has been okay. That's a sweeping statement, but it's what I believe.
Well, I think Presence was pretty good too, I think.
Had its moments. It was a wheelchair album, Presence.
It wasn't physical though. Physical.
No, I was in a wheelchair all the time. It was tough, that was. You could hear it in the voice. Presence was a real difficult record.
What is your favorite Zepp song?
Hot Dog. No.
The real boom story in American music at the moment is the return of the rock guitar. No fewer than 10 out of the top 30 U.S. albums are by heavy rock artists, including the Scorpions, Guns N' Roses, Robert Plant, Def Leppard, INXS, Iron Maiden, Poison, and White Lion. The fastest-selling debut album this year is by Kingdom Come, who sound alarmingly like the stadium bands of the 70s.
It is, of course, Led Zeppelin. Even Zepp singer himself, Robert Plant, samples 6 of his old tracks on his new LP, and bassist John Paul Jones is producing goth heroes The Mission.
Copying and emulation, you know, blatant stealing. I might as well join in. And in a way, it is kind of funny too.
I'm totally bemused by it all, actually.
It's good for your bank balance.
Well, I don't know. I don't mind, you know, it's a form of flattery, really, that these people are using old riffs and other styles, and, you know, my lawyer doesn't agree, but...
John Paul Jones.
The Bonham bass drum and the Bonham snare drum, you know. One is last to use it.
When the levee breaks.
I mean, everybody else has used it, and you think, oh, why not?
One of the best examples of a Led Zeppelin sample is taken from Led Zeppelin 4 album called When the Levee Breaks, track When the Levee Breaks. And the Beastie Boys have used that, just the beat, and looped it like this. Using a drum machine as well. So, and that sample just loops.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, that's easy enough. But I mean, if you said, well, what album is it from? I couldn't really tell you.
But is that refreshing to hear it in a new context?
Yeah.
Do you like the Beastie Boys?
Not particularly. You know, it's...
That's taken from a track called The Ocean on the album The House of the Holy. That's like this. You can just take it off like that, or you can just carry it on like a loop.
And the vocalist, he sounds just like David Coverdale.
Moving on to David Coverdale, he seems to base himself on some of the poses you threw in the 70s.
No, he reminds me of Lenny Wolf, the singer from Kingdom Come.
We happen to sound a lot like the old Led Zeppelin, no doubt about it. A sound like Robert Plant in the old days. And there's no way. But sometimes when you come off like you really know what you want, some people call it arrogant. I call it insecurity from their side.
As far as the copyist bands are concerned, it's a shame they don't do something of their own, really. You know, it must be awful having to copy everybody all the time. Really tedious, I would have thought. The whole business is Spinal Tap, basically. I mean, there is no getting away from it, really. That is rock and roll.
Jimmy's first and only album to date, Outrider, was released to Geffen Records on June 19th, 1988. The song Rights of Winter was nominated for Best Rock Instrumental Performance for the 1989 Grammy Awards. A first time for Jimmy, but looking at the nominees, well, his song was up against serious contenders. The Jeff Healey Band for Hideaway, Carlos Santana, Blues for Salvador, Joe Satriani, Surfing with the Alien, Frank Zappa, Guitar. Yeah, sorry Jimmy, it's over. And the winner was Carlos Santana, with his 1987 solo album. Like Jimmy's Outrider, Blues for Salvador had a black and white album cover, and it seems to be a lost and overlooked record for Santana fans. It's like Coda for Zeppelin casual fans. Both albums feature former bandmates, singers included. Carlos shows he can still shred, and his soloing is wild. The album has both live and studio cuts. The production is very 80s and sounds dated in parts, but the songs can rock hard in places. My personal favorite? Train. That riff alone, and Tony Williams on drums, is worth buying the record. If you ask me, I believe Joe Satriani should have won the Grammy 1989 for his quintessential 6-string masterpiece, Surfing with the Alien, an album that inspired millions and was a success in reshaping the instrumental guitar landscape. It paved the way for a new type of career for guitar virtuosos. Interestingly enough, Satriani and his peers really owe so much to Carlos Santana's ballads, like Samba Pa Ti, Flor de Luna, and Europa. It proved guitar instrumentals could be a hit beyond a niche audience and reach non-musicians as well in the 70s. Carlos Santana's contribution to lyricism and the electric guitar cannot be undervalued. Although he went strictly commercial past his 9 Grammys with Supernatural, he remains one of the most recognizable guitar sounds ever, and his music is filled with love, devotion, and surrender. Jimmy Page went on tour to promote Outrider. A total of 36 states saw him play with a band comprised of John Miles on vocals and keyboards, Durban Laverde on bass, and Jason Bonham on drums. Let's take a look at the average setlist. Stylistically speaking, it was a good mix of both old and new tracks, and yes, Like Robert Plant in '88, Jimmy played Led Zeppelin material beyond Stairway to Heaven, as well as returning to his Les Paul sound, in this case his number 3, the red one, seen for the last time on the 1977 tour.
I bought the CD yesterday and I really love it. My question is, I read in a few different articles that the album was supposed to be a double album, and my question is, what happened to the rest of the material, and which singer are you going to be taking on tour with you?
Oh, I'll answer the first part. I started off working on a double album, and I'll tell you what the idea of it was going to be. One side rock and roll, one side blues, one side acoustic, and one side experimental, and that was going to be with vocals as well. When I started to come on the work of putting the guitars on, it seemed to be such a... It was, you know, stretching me quite a bit, and I thought I'd just drive myself insane doing all this work. So in the end, I just decided to make it a single album, and you know...
I was wondering, what are the chances of you getting back with Robert and John Baldwin, alias John Paul Jones, in the future to do some more tracks?
Well, as I say, there isn't anything planned at this point. Well, basically because Robert's doing his tour, and he's way into that, and I think he's got quite a bit more touring to do beyond what he's doing at the moment over here in the States. I believe so, anyway. Of course, I've got my tour coming up in fall, so it's quite a way off, really, that we'd even, be able to do it, even if it was on the cards, which it isn't at the moment. But I'm sure we will do something. At least Robert and I'll do something. I don't know about with John yet, but it's hard to say because we haven't discussed it.
Do you know what John Paul is into musically these days?
Well, he's produced The Mission.
Right.
I don't know whether that's doing anything over here or not, is it? What?
It's not superstar status, but
no,
I mean, there are people that know what it is.
Yeah, they're pretty big in England, you see, The Mission. And, I mean, it really did well for them, and it really did good for him, because he produced the Benny King album a little while back. I mean, basically, he's into doing production at the moment, I think.
My question is, at the Atlantic anniversary, Robert Plant made the statement, "You'll be hearing more from us." By any chance, does this mean that after y'all both finish y'all solo tours, that y'all would head into the studio with John Paul Jones, Jason Bonham, to revive a new Zeppelin?
Well, I'll be perfectly honest with you. There's been no plans for that at all, and no discussions with Robert either on that. As far as Robert and I working together again, I would think that there's a very strong likelihood of that, because we've never really stopped working together one way or the other since the end of Zeppelin, so to speak. So we'll see.
My question is that I'd heard that after John Bonham's death, it took you nearly 2 years to pick up your guitar again, and I was wondering what motivated you to start playing again.
No, that's a little exaggerated. It was a matter of months, really, because I was quite affected, to say the least, by the passing of a really dear friend. And if you can picture the fact that, I mean, every time I picked up the guitar prior to that, at home, for instance, I'd start to begin to write something, which obviously was going to be for Led Zeppelin.
You did some soundtrack work for Charles Bronson's movie Death Wish 3. Any plans to do any more soundtrack work?
No, let me explain. I did the soundtrack work for Death Wish 2.
Or Death Wish 2, yeah.
And then when he made Death Wish 3, he I don't know who he had in mind to do the actual soundtrack, but he applied the same method. He put the musical sections in to where he wanted to, the person to supply music. He was using the music from Death Wish 2 onto Death Wish 3. And he called me up and said, "Look, this is amazing. You must come and see this and listen to it." He said, "It just works so good. Can I use it again?" So in fact, he used the same music twice.
So some of the music that you did
for Death Wish 2, it was
did show up on Death Wish 3.
Yeah. So I mean, that was a great compliment, I thought, as far as the.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
I guess my next question would be, what do you think of the current state of rock and roll?
Well, it depends what you mean by rock and roll. Do you mean, image rock, or do you mean, image pop rather, or do you mean rock?
I mean real rock and roll. You think we're pretty healthy these days?
Real rock and roll is pretty good.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like to know about your reaction to the music of White Snake and Kingdom Come.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it?
It's a catch-all word.
yeah, it's interesting.
Is your reaction
interesting and amusing? Whitesnake's sort of amusing. I find it amusing. I don't find Kingdom Come so amusing because, for instance, Get It On or whatever it's called. Is it called Get It On? Yeah.
That's one of the songs. Yeah.
Well, that's a little too close to comfort, really, and I'm sure they know it, but still, it's handy for them, isn't it?
Now, the guitarist, I guess, has claimed that he's never heard you play. What's your reaction to that?
Well, that must be quite some feat to grow up in America, you know, and never have heard Led Zeppelin. I think that's quite something. He must be quite an interesting bloke, but maybe I've visited him, you know, psychically or something.
I would first like to say that I love the song Liquid Mercury. Too bad you didn't name it Liquid Fire, because I manage a band called Liquid Fire.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was wondering if there's any film or video material in the Led Zeppelin archives. Number one, do you have the rights to it? And number two, is there a chance of it being released in the future?
Well, there is some footage, actually, from at the Albert Hall in London, and then the last British date that we did at Nebworth, which was a big open-air festival thing. But of course, there's a lot of work. Oh yeah, we've got the rights to it, I believe.
Will it ever be released?
Anyway. Hey?
Will it ever be released?
I don't know. It's possible somewhere down the future, you know. I don't think Robert's very keen on anything coming out.
Well, talk to him. Talk to him, Jimmy.
You guys talk to him.
Robert.
So, Jimmy, as I'm sure most everybody knows right now, you've got your first solo album.
That's right, yeah.
A lot of people I know that have heard the album, the first thing they've said is, they say it's a return to form for you. I think probably what they're saying is that perhaps the second firm album, they're a little disappointed.
Possibly.
Do you feel?
I thought the second firm album was good as the first one.
Bit of Led Zeppelin there, rockers, and a bit of Black Dog. Jimmy, that's probably the most famous rock riff in the whole world. Can you still actually remember sitting there and writing that?
Well, I remember writing part of it because Jonesy was part of the writing of that riff as well, actually. But yeah, I remember doing it.
When does the tour actually start?
Well, it starts in America, and it starts in August.
Right.
And goes through to November.
Right.
And then hopefully we'll do some dates over here, Decemberish. Yeah.
Christmas time, eh?
Well, yeah, early part of December. No?
Right. Actually, I saw Jason just a couple of days after he got back from New York, and he was still, like, really high on the whole thing, you know. Yeah. Did you enjoy yourself while you were out in New York?
Yeah, I got pretty nervous actually on that particular thing, because usually I just get used to pacing myself towards the gig. You know, we were supposed to go on at 12 and we went on at 1:30, and I was like that by then. You know, I think it tells if you've heard it. But it was fun.
Actually got one of these to give away. Can you see that? That says Jimmy Page Outrider. And that, my friends, is a lunchbox. In fact, hang 10 there. We have a Jimmy Page interview CD with a very, very famous rock journalist. Can't remember his name. Jimmy Page Outrider cassette. Bit of Jimmy Page bump. Words you can read, can't you, rockers? Of course you can. And a Jimmy Page Outrider interview video cassette, also done with probably the most famous rock journalist in the world. What is his name, that guy? I don't know. Anyway, we've got one of these to give away. We've also got 2 brand new Jimmy Page albums, Outrider, and all you have to do, if you want to win them, is answer me this incredibly difficult question, as it's the last show. What's the name of the guitar that Mr. Page here is most famously associated with? What's the name of the guitar? And if you think that's not difficult, how's this? What year was it made? And you also got a new unknown young man called, what's his name?
Yeah, he passed the audition, Robert Plant.
Robert Plant, yeah, he sings on one track.
Yeah.
We only given him one track, though, eh? We mean you don't fight as much, it's more polite.
No, we never used to fight that much.
You can tell me, Jimmy!
We'd be as assertive as necessary.
No, it's all right.
What a diplomat. What a nice man and a diplomat.
You mean do we fight now? We didn't just fight then.
Give me all the dirt while we play a video.
I'll tell you later.
All right.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. Right. Okay, we'll have some slight preparations here. Always do that. Right. You ready for some music? You ready for us? We're ready for you, too. Okay, here we go.
He began the show with Who's to Blame and Prelude from Death Wish 2, good warm-ups that got things going. John Miles' voice was very good, making Who's to Blame closer to the studio version. Paul Rodgers didn't sound natural on this track. Jimmy Page Prelude on the Les Paul instead of his B-Bender Telecaster was interesting. Being a heavy guitar, it probably gave him a boost of nostalgia back to the good old days. Over the Hills and Far Away was a great choice. John Miles recreated Plant's original 1972 high register, and what a treat it was. Jimmy's soloing was fluid and the rhythm section was great. A superb rendition of the song. Next, they play two cuts from Outrider. Wanna Make Love can be a bit generic in places, but John Miles' vocals shine. He had that high raspy voice in the same vein of Axl Rose. The song seems to be built around that, and well, it kinda gets tiring after a while, but it's played with passion. Looking at the footage, you kinda understand why this tour was eventually cancelled due to low ticket sales. Jimmy is Jimmy, no one can deny it. There's just something weird about watching him solo when his fame was built in a band. He seems to overshine on stage, and after a while, you get too much Jimmy. Great for fans who never got to see Zeppelin, but revisiting the footage, you wish John Paul Jones and Robert Plant were there. Rights of Winter is a long piece that, well, it could have said so much more with less. This blues shuffle ends with the famous Knapworth 1979 riff to go into one of my favorites by The Firm, Tear Down the Walls. Jimmy is happy to play this one. Once again, he shines as a band player, and John Miles makes the track his own. This duo really worked on stage. John Miles was like a musical and physical blend of Robert Plant and Paul Rodgers. I'll call him Paul Planters. Miles was no amateur. He won an Ivor Novello Award for Best Middle of the Road Song in 1977 for his track Music. Produced by Alan Parsons in 1976, Music was a #1 hit in Europe. He toured with Tina Turner in 1987 and worked with many artists including Alan Parsons. He passed away in 2021 at age 72. Jimmy went into my favorite track from Outrider, Emerald Eyes. Although the studio version was played on acoustic, the chordal voicings and rhythm work on this track really takes you back to this latter period with Zeppelin, a song of many emotions, and a fine display of dynamics. We then moved to the then electro part of the show for Midnight Moonlight, White Summer, and Black Mountain Side. A tasteful selection indeed. John Mayall's voice, and I'll say it, really outdoes Paul Rodgers' previous take on Midnight Moonlight. Jimmy revisits the good old sitting down shred guitar frenzy, an acquired taste for sure, but it's like the Picasso of open tuning electric guitar. Now onto the tour's musical treasure, In My Time of Dying. Boy did I miss this track in all of Jimmy's shows from the 80s up to this point. It's such a big part of his legacy, and a killer song on stage. He was born to do this, and you can tell he's thrilled to play this again for the first time since June 25th, 1977.
Jesus gonna make it my dying day.
John Mayall was a perfect singer for this tour. His pipes have the proper tone and phrasing. I am glad the firm didn't do Zeppelin numbers with Paul Rodgers, but too bad John Mayall never worked with Jimmy again. A wasted opportunity. The show could have ended here really, but no. We got another number from Death Wish 2, City Sirens. It was used as an intro for Jason's drum solo. Okay, the drum solo. Well, I'm not a drummer myself. I am a frustrated drummer. I could listen to drum solos all day. This one though, I have mixed feelings. See for yourself. Another Outrider number is next, Prison Blues. For a second there, I thought they were playing Who's to Blame Part 2. Prison Blues features a sort of jam reminiscent of Zeppelin's early tours, or at least trying to be. Next song is The Chase from Death Wish 2. In the same fashion as the firm's setlist, it works as an intro for an aggressive violin bow segment. His laser effect features new shapes. He then moves on to the harmonizer Theatrics. Next thing we know, He switched guitars probably due to the violin bow's resin affecting his playing on the strings. You see, whenever you play this thing, you have to do it close to the guitar bridge, so when you solo later with a pick, it doesn't get stuck on the resin. My Zeppelin tribute days made me learn this the hard way. Jimmy goes into a nice surprise for fans. The solo and last verse section of Dazed and Confused, something he hadn't played since 1975 at Elscourt. Next song, Wasting My Time, was another cut from Outrider, a solid hard rock tune with John Miles once again shining on vocals, with great pace from Jason and Durban Laverde. Let's talk about the bass player, Durban Laverde. Talk about good luck. He was born in Venezuela in 1951, moved to England, and saw Led Zeppelin play Wembley on November 20th, 1971. He played as session musician for Manfred Mann's Earth Band, The Hollies, and BBC's productions. David Gilmour was recording A Momentary Lapse of Reason and invited Laverde to the sessions, where he met Jimmy's tour manager at the time, Phil Carlo. Phil told Durban to audition for Page. He got the job and recorded 3 songs for Outrider. An acoustic side is played in the Ways of Blues anthem. The closing song for Outrider features John Miles on keyboards as well. The show ends with the Zeppelin number Custard Pie, plus Black Dog in between, and a famous opener Jimmy played in 1980, Train Kept It Rollin'. The 1988 tour ended, and that was it for Jimmy's solo career, it seems. He's been announcing his new album for almost 40 years now.
You guess what it is, haven't you? Phoenix, you have been fantastic to us. Yes, you are. From Mason Ruffner, John Miles, Durban Laverde, Uncle Tom Copley, Jason Bonham, myself, Jimmy Page. God bless you all. Hope to see you again.